everybody. Welcome to This Week in Innovation. Shiv Dutt, VP Customer Experience and Innovation at Pampered Chef, joins Brian and I for discussion on how Pampered Chef is building and monetizing micro-communities. They just launched Table, a digital platform that enables its consultants to host customized virtual cooking parties that deliver content designed to improve a customer's mealtime journey. It was built quickly using lowcode on Interplay that allows for rapid integration of additional functionality. I really believe that this is going to be an early peek at what many retailers will be doing with their own communities within a few years. Give it a listen and let us know what you think.
I am excited to have Shiv Dutt, the Vice President of Pampered Chef. He's going to tell us more today about, I call it a $1 billion idea, which is how do you build monetizable micro communities. Shiv has been in our podcast but today we've invited Shiv over to essentially to tell us and educate our listeners in this topic. So Shiv, welcome.
Thank you, Brian. I'm super excited to join you again.
Shiv, tell us a little bit about this idea of monetizable micro communities and how you are propagating this concept with the platform that you've launched at Pampered.
I think a good place to start for me, maybe for listeners who are not familiar with a model, is maybe a little bit about kind of the role I'm in, what I'm doing, the problem we had, and then I think that will give a little more context on the solution and what could be, as you said, be a pretty big idea if we can figure it out and we can do it. So essentially, a little bit of background. Pampered Chef is a direct selling company, so essentially uses networks. So it essentially is an early adopter of social commerce as a way to sell products. Our vision is to solve mealtime challenges and reinvent mealtime. And so we sell mealtime solutions, whether it's product, consumables, or recipes, and really help people figure out how to cook at home. So that's our vision. Historically, the way we've gone to market is actually physical one-to-one group settings. So when you talk about micro communities, we used to do micro communities, but the way it used to exist in-person networks within small communities. So literally within communities, people would get together and participate in these cooking events where people would learn about cooking, share their passions, and as a result of that, lead to a shopping experience, which was both help solve pain points, but also help people make money and help the community thrive as well. And that's where, when we started to look at the problem, was there are groups of people who are interested in a common problem that they want to solve jointly together, and then learn from one another and engage in a shopping experience with the goal of getting products that actually solve the problems, that actually find solutions that they have identified as a group as their common interest. That problem and that interest, we started to think about it in a similar way, is to say, what if these micro communities could actually exist in a virtual setting where the groups could get together that have common interests, share content, share information, socialize with one another, share tips and tricks, learn from one another with the final intent of potentially buying product, but maybe not. Maybe all they do is share their interests and learn something from one another and have a fun experience. And so that was the hypothesis we had. And what we went down the path of was working with Iterate is to really quickly mock up a proof of concept around that and start testing it out, which we did. And what we found is it actually encouraged groups of people to get together. And we started seeing that the shopping behavior was actually pretty strong. And we started seeing better results from our solution than what was already existing in the marketplace and other ways people were hacking the solution. And so we went down the path of actually building out a platform that essentially quickly enables the creation of micro communities by people who are interested, and a natural viral way of building those communities. Some of these communities are 10 people, some of these communities could have 50 people in them, but they get together for a certain defined period of time. That can be a week, that could be a month, it could be longer than that, depending on their interests and what they'd like to do. And they participate, share their interests, share customizable content, share personalized information, and ultimately partake in a shopping experience, which actually leads to some of the community moderators to make money, and of course Pampered Chef to make money, and for consumers to solve their mealtime problem. And so we just launched this platform, and it's called Table, and it was launched in September. I'm happy to inform that to begin with, we're starting to see some early successes. I think one of the things that I think really important point you bring out there, Brian, I think there's a couple of pieces and that's really important. You're exactly right. one is the what, and the what is there's these micro communities that enable solutioning and a different shopping experience, which is really authentic and which is really driven by the consumer. But I think implicit in that is also the how. The how we're building these communities and how we're improving these communities is actually a model where our product managers are really the people. They really are what we call, in our words, in our language, it's our consultants. But they're essentially preferred customers. They're our highest, they're our most loyal customers, the people who love our products to the extent that they want to actually sell our products and make it a part of their business. But they're essentially our product managers. So we are spending less time in building large teams of people that are product managing and prioritizing what's important and what's not. Instead, we're spending a lot of time actively listening to and crowdsourcing product management from the field, and then using your platform, which is enabling quick product development. So we're taking we're taking agile to the next level, where we're using crowdsourced information directly from the field and then actioning on that in a fast and agile way through leveraging your platform.
That what are some of the things that you have to intentionally do in this noise elimination, right, in order to get to the need of what matters to them? And how did you actually go about doing it?
I think it starts with hypothesis. So I think what we did is we started off where we started was by saying, can we mimic an existing social platform as closely as possible? And if we were to mimic it but just make it ours, what would that look like? That's where we started. We started that process out a year ago, and then what we said is, let's on a weekly basis. We started with about 10 people, and we actually asked them to we did a proof of concept where they actually ran events right from the get-go with a very early stage proof of concept that we took, which was basically a social platform knockoff. And what we learned is our concern was it's never going to be as sophisticated as was any larger social network like Facebook or others, because obviously we don't have the same investments, and that's going to be the barrier, and we're going to find that they're going to want all these features. What we learned was actually that wasn't the case. What we learned was less was more. And what they wanted was they wanted a lot cleaner interface. They wanted to take away a lot of the noise. They wanted the focus to be on content that mattered. They wanted the ability to personalize and filter content and see the things that mattered most to them. One of the things was people talked about was, they said is they described our experience as we started cleaning it out as a spa experience compared to social network. You come in there, you know what you're getting in there for. It's cleaner, it's focused, and we keep iterating and we keep improving. And a lot of the improvements are actually reducing the amounts of features and then focusing the attention on things that matter most and surfacing the things that matter more in a clean interface. And these are some of our early findings, but we're continuing to iterate and learn on a weekly basis and continuing to improve and add new things where a lot of the technology is on the background, but the surface view is a lot cleaner and a lot more.
And just the way you described it, I'm sitting here and I'm not even a big foodie. I'm sitting here thinking I need to join this platform just because it sounds so fantastic that maybe there's a place where people can actually communicate again. So that's awesome. I'm curious, Shiv, what's the age range? I'm sure you're going to say it's from 2 to 100 or something, but does it net out anywhere? I'm thinking of some of the folks, I'm in my 60s, so I can say this. Some of the folks that are my age and above, social media would be a little harder for them. They're not as interested. So the idea of thinning down the feature set probably makes sense. I'm just curious if you've got a sense what age ranges are.
I think our starting point is obviously Pampered Chef has a target, I would say has a built-in consumer base that tends to be a little bit older. So call it mid to late 30s and going up to 50. So you have a lot of people with, not surprisingly, who are cook at home. They have kids, they have children, or they're in a situation where they're required to do it and they have to multitask a lot. So that tends to be their core age group, which ranges from anywhere from 35. A sweet spot is anywhere from 35 to call it 50. We do have some older customers as well. Pampered Chef has been around for a long time, and they're people who are diehard loyal to us. So we do have older customers, which you're exactly right, Jeff. For a lot of them, it's the clean interface is a lot easier than all the different features and all the different widgets that exist in other places. But we're even finding with the younger customers that they find it interesting too, and for different reasons, because they're just, to your point, they're just tired of all the noise that they have to deal with. And for them, it's they come in here, it's purpose driven, they focus on the things they need, and they move on. Jeff, I think as we go on, my expectation is we'll probably start finding a lot of younger customers starting to migrate here too, or that's our hypothesis. And that's probably one of the things we are going to continue to figure out, to say what are the things we need to do and to continue, because the core part of our business value proposition is creating value through virality and vice versa, using virality to create value. And so virality is a key aspect of our customer acquisition cost. And everything we do is around enabling virality in a very natural, authentic way. And so part of what I'm trying to figure out, work with Brian, is what are those elements, what are those things we do to encourage new, different demographics to want to join.
This audio, video, both?
Yeah, all of the above. So I would say our core, the way these communities work is one of the things we learned was you needed to have the ability to have an asynchronous event. And so one of the things is the core foundation of it is these communities can live asynchronously, so people can come in as and when they like, but enable interactions which may require video, which may require other mediums as well. So in these communities, there's videos, we've done lots of integrations, and that's part of, I think, the interesting thing that Brian and I've worked on is we've not tried to do is build every element from ourselves. What we said is, what are some really unique and interesting solutions that exist in the marketplace that maybe other people are doing that we can take and incorporate into the platform in a common framework. So think of it as we've defined the sandbox in this community, and we've got within the sandbox, we can plug and play solutions that exist in the marketplace, and we can change those out all the time. As an example, we incorporated a up-and-coming startup, which was a video platform startup, which works really beautifully and is a very clean experience. And we just plug and play that within our experience, and it just fits in seamlessly. Tomorrow, and we're seeing great success, so we're going to continue it. Tomorrow, we've got hypotheses on live sell platforms or incorporating more AI type technology. So the beautiful thing about the way it works is we've got a common, clean framework, and then we are now taking modular technology solutions and fitting it, and doing it in a way where it's very easy to use it. And so it's not about the technology, but more about what it enables.
Yeah, absolutely, Shiv. I think one of the things that you touched on here in this point is like the modularity of the technology, right? The modularity of being able to bring new things, right? And enable you to go faster, go to market. This platform table was built by using the low-code Interplay capability. But how did low-code specifically help you, like from a go-to-market perspective and from a modularity perspective? How do you see this as a faster go-to-market strategy in terms of how quickly you were able to move from point A to point B?
Yeah, no, I think it was, Brian, and I'm certainly not a technologist, but what I would say is that we went from proof of concept to an initial MVP speccing within 6 months, and then from initial MVP speccing to a full-scale platform within another 6 months, and which includes things, exactly to your point, which includes things like video platforms, a virtual kitchen. It has 18 different integrations with things like YouTube, Canva, Issue, you name it. Even with our native digital platform, we've got integrations. So I think part of the reason we were able to do all these integrations, build a front-end interface, build all these integrations, and do it all in what I think is breakneck speed in 6 months, and largely with about one sprint team. So we're not talking about investments here of $10 million with large engineering teams. We're talking about a single sprint team, 5 to 10 engineers, and working for 6 months to build an entire platform, which we've now been able to monetize. And I can tell you, within the first 10 days, we've had over 50,000 guests that have shown up on this platform, and 10,000 plus users, and 5,000 communities that have already been built. So it's pretty incredible that at the pace at which we have developed it. So So I attribute a lot of that to low code. I attribute that our ability to pick solutions, to test it out, to incorporate it, and when it doesn't work, to switch. And as an example, and I'll just use this as an example, Brian, and you remember we started off by using a different video platform. We actually had a different, a more entrenched solution that we were testing out initially. And after testing it out for about 2 or 3 weeks, we just did not like the experience. And we stumbled upon this other newcomer who was out there. We had a conversation with them for a couple of weeks, and within another couple of weeks, we had integrated and we were running it. And now that's the platform we're going with. So from conceptualization to delivery, it was less than a month. And the technology, the integration piece, I think, Brian, you can talk more, it was probably less than a couple of weeks. And I can't imagine that happening if we didn't have low code as an enabler.
That absolutely, Shiv. I think this is definitely an interesting testament to how quickly retailers and brands, leaders within these companies can go to market faster. Because at the end of the day, I think what we're really trying to do, like you said, is to serve our customers and provide them what they need in a contextual manner, like things that can engage them. So Shiv, I have I've been dying to ask these two questions. But the first one is, what is next with this platform? Do you see this being expanded into other verticals, this type of capability? That's question one. Question two is, essentially for retailers and even brands who may not have a direct micro community fit, but there are opportunities around it. And what are your views as well? So those are the two questions. Love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, the first one's I think is probably an easy. I do think there are a lot of their verticals. I think there is, just the direct selling industry, which is where we participate, is a 40 billion plus industry. And frankly, I think I think in really direct selling is nothing but a monetizable, a kind of an existing monetizable way of driving social commerce. So I know people are coming at social commerce. It's a hot topic. That's what it is. It's social commerce, and so social commerce is being attacked from many different angles. And I think it has existed in a way that is incredibly monetizable and economically very attractive for a long time. And I think just that industry alone, I think with many verticals in beauty space and in skincare and lots of different areas within there, I think there's just lots of interesting opportunities. So I do think that these micro communities are going to become more relevant. And I think if the people are hungry to find alternatives to existing social platforms, I think customers are looking for alternatives. And that's not to say there's anything that those will disappear. I think they will stay, but this is an alternative format that will exist. And I think people will look to do it. And especially if it can be done the way, hopefully we are going to prove it out, which is a fairly low cost, lower lift and focused effort, I think it has incredible opportunities. So from my perspective, I think many verticals can and will exist. I think I see it as we are the first frontier. I see even us potentially starting to think about how we can expand and look at this platform as an enabler for many other people. So I think lots of opportunities there. But of course, we have to continue to prove out the concept and make sure that it has staying power and continue to innovate around it. Your second question, Brian, around, and if you don't mind, if you can repeat the question, because I want to make sure I can answer it correctly.
My question is, Shiv, if you look at retailers and brands who may not have a direct selling concept, but they might have variations of some of the core concepts that you have built, right? How can retailers and brands think about micro communities, and how can they monetize micro communities? In fact, there are a lot of times when I speak to retail leaders, there have been pushbacks on, we are not sure whether micro community is the right thing for us, versus sometimes why would consumers come to us for a micro community, right? How do you do micro community for retailers and brands, and because a lot of our listeners are essentially retailers and brands, and wanted to see your views on them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's happening. So the question is, there are two questions. Does it happen, and then can they authentically own it and drive a solution around it? The first one is, it is happening. So I'll give you a good example. Brands such as Instapot, case study, they've got groups within Facebook that are massive micro communities supporting one another. And it's extremely viral, extremely interesting. But again, if you're Instapot, you don't have control of the data. You don't know what's actually going on other than what you're seeing or what you're hoping to get from it. Yet those groups are incredibly powerful. There's incredible amounts of data that exists there that can provide direct insight on both product development as well as future solutioning and innovation, as well as just it can help drive additional sales. So I think so number one is I think it's happening. Can brands get in and create their own communities and actually get people over there? I think that's where there will be a merge. I think that there's an opportunity to merge these concepts. So this idea, what direct sales does essentially is they find their preferred customers and monetizes their preferred customers in a unique way. I think preferred customers exist with all brands and it exists with all retailers. I think the question will be, can you find those preferred customers and essentially engage them and empower them to bring others into the system? And I do think there is an opportunity there. I'm not saying it's easy, but I do think it is an opportunity. And I think it's probably a worthwhile investment to look at because data is power. And right now, and the people who have the data are the people who are going to have the most power. And I think the brands that will figure that out and can get out there and can get access to that data and use that to make better decision making. It's not just about the sales. It's also about just what it opens up in terms of customer behavior. And that's what when you talk about, when I say 50,000 customers, that's 50,000 data points that we are now getting that's giving us information about what they like, what they don't like. And so we haven't even begun to understand, to unpack that and draw insights from it. That is the next frontier and the opportunity. So I think it's an interesting and important problem for both retailers and brands to want to solve.
I got to say, this is one of the most optimistic conversations I've been in an awful long time. It's all positive. We're building community. We're building it around the most important process we have. Probably breathing is most important. Eating is number two. And you're doing it, Shiv, as a forecaster. When I hear you implement it in 2 weeks, that's awesome for you. And that must scare your consulting friends to death. You don't have to answer that. You don't have to answer that. But I'm thinking
it's definitely a partnership. I think it's what started off as a hypothesis is quickly turning into something much bigger. And I think I would say we're learning as we go. And I think what we're finding is that we may be on the cusp of something that could be much bigger. And the technology enablement, this would not have been possible maybe 5 years ago. I wasn't familiar with low code. I wasn't familiar with the enablers. And with those enablers, this is now becoming a reality. And I think it'll only get better. I don't know whether you agree with that, Brian.
No, I completely agree with that, Shiv. I think you couldn't have said it any more perfectly, because I think it's a lot of those things. I was listening to one of the analysts, the futurists, speak the other day, and one thing that she was mentioning is that every one of these technologies, especially the ones that we cover here, right, the 5 forces, AI, blockchain, startups, IoT, they are all going through their S-curves, right? The adaption curves, and they're all getting to a point where they're gaining significant adaptions. And then each one of those curves are feeding into each other. So you're getting this exponential effect of the innovation. And I think it's an interesting concept, like even the micro community we're talking about, right? Several S-curves came together, the S-curve of AI, the social interaction and so digital social platforms, the S-curve of actual low-code technology behind it that can power this. All of them are getting together, a place that we can really experiment quickly and provide real great value to our customers. And it's really fascinating. I was telling somebody the other day, this is the greatest time to live.
Couldn't agree more. I agree with you. I think there's a convergence that's happening, and I think people are looking for new ways to interact. And I think you're exactly right. I think there's going to be some really interesting opportunities that'll come up. And I think Jeff, it's interesting you mentioned positive, because I do think that you can either look at the situation glass half full or half empty. And I really look at it as a glass half full opportunity, because I don't see these as new ways to interact or something, or new innovation from a standpoint of we're changing behavior. I actually see enabling existing behaviors in a way that's far more convenient and relevant, leveraging technology. So for me, I think technology should enable more authentic interaction, and that's going to be the next frontier. And I think that's what we hope we can go down the path of uncovering and unpacking.
Do you think this would have happened if we weren't all locked down, for the whole world locked down for a year? Would this have happened on its own?
I think it's accelerated it for sure. I think a lot of the things, just simple things like the acceptance of video chat. 2 years ago, video chat has existed for a long time. Video conferencing has existed. I remember sitting in a video conference in 2012 and feeling very awkward in that meeting, thinking to myself, this will never take off because it just doesn't seem to make sense. And here we are, and it's the norm. So I do think it has accelerated it, and I think it's made a lot of new technologies. Things like I talked about a virtual kitchen. It was the use case around a virtual kitchen maybe 2 years ago was a fringe idea that was kind of interesting and cool technology for the sake of technology, but not necessarily solving a problem. And guess what? Now, if you're sitting at home, people are scared of going out. The idea of actually envisioning or AR or VR has become actually very relevant. I find myself using it. So I think it's accelerated a lot of these technologies, which is super exciting. A lot of those fringe technologies are now no longer fringe. And I think it's opened up incredible possibilities.
Yeah. Brian and I are trying to come up with the right way to build a deck around what we're talking about. But it's clear that in retail and retail tech, there's BC before COVID. And I'm not sure what the AD equivalent is, but I think when we look back in 10 or 15 years, we're going to split it right down here because this accelerates.
AC after COVID.
BC and AC. Oh, that works. But I agree with you on that. This has been way too positive for me as an analyst to listen to all this good stuff. We got to get a little bit negative. There has to be challenges. What are the problems? What did you have to overcome to make this work? There has to be something negative here.
The challenges are with anything you build hypotheses and then you're going to get it wrong. So you have to understand that we have, and Brian, I know, started the conversation by talking about somebody with a positive experience and talking about how great this is. There are people who will tell you this is terrible. This doesn't make any sense. I don't understand it. It's too hard. It's new technology. Why are we doing this? Why don't we just stick to what we know? It just depending on where you are on the maturity curve there or willingness to innovate curve, I think you have people who are against it. And again, from my perspective, and so you have the naysayers, and those naysayers virality is a double-edged sword. Those naysayers will convince a lot of other people that this is terrible and they shouldn't be doing it. It's an interesting dynamic and an interesting force of nature to watch the two sides duke it out. And we watch it on social network where I love watching it because every time somebody says something negative, there are other people who come in and say, this is part of the process and you need to learn. And vice versa. People who are positive, either people coming in saying, it's not there yet, I'm having challenges, these micro communities are not working, they're not engaging, they're not interesting. And the reality is it's not a sure shot. I don't think we have a solution, a formula which guarantees success. So I'm not going to say that we have guaranteed success. What we've done is we have opened up new opportunities. And what we've agreed to do is to actively listen to the negative feedback and not shut it out, because implicit in that negative feedback is probably some great ideas that'll actually enable us to get better. But I do think we need to get better and we need to continue to innovate. I think what we've launched is a MVP that shows promise. What we need to do is now start to mature it and make sure that the scales are more positive than negative versus it right now being split. So right now it's probably there's negative, there's positive. We want to get to a point where that scale starts to tip incredibly on the other side, and we are much closer to guaranteeing success. That's when it starts getting really interesting. I would say my personal target is through the end of this year, next year, our goal is to try to solve that problem to the point where we're in a year and a half, we're talking about potentially scaling this out and opening it up as a platform for other people who may be interested.
That's fantastic. Brian, what I liked the most in what Shiv just said is the ability to absorb negative information and learn from them. And if there's one lesson we can really pump out to the entire retail industry is we simply have to encourage people to make mistakes and learn from them and do it fast. Try not to do it, spend a lot of money doing it. We just have to encourage that. This industry is so far behind most other industries when it comes to the ability to make a mistake and learn from it. And we just have to fix that. And I keep hearing that, and I love these stories. I just absolutely love these stories. Shiv, we've kept you actually 15 minutes longer than we promised, so thanks for that. In wrapping this up, how big do you think this thing is going to be? Not just with what Shiv's doing at Pampered Chef, but in thinking who benefits from a micro community. I got to think we're in 85% of the retailers that would benefit in some aspect. Maybe not as engaged as this because their cooking is passion, but Home Depot, specialty, toy stores, apparel, I'm at a loss to see who wouldn't benefit. Maybe even the deep discounters would. They could have special sales or special engagements. This thing has the potential to literally go across the entire industry like nothing I've ever seen before.
No, I agree. I fully agree with you, Jeff. I think this has a broad appeal, right? A broad swath of areas and categories and subcategories.
Brian or Shiv, as we wrap this up, it's just a terrific conversation, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for being such an excellent partner, obviously, Brian, and look forward. I'm excited about what the future holds.